Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. It's time, once again, for those egocentric attention whores, Harry and Meghan. A number of people have been making comparisons between Harry and Meghan with another royal couple that got into trouble many years ago, King Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson. While there's the obvious similarity that both Harry and Edward had fallen in love with an American divorcee, the situations that these two found themselves in are rather different, and part of that has to do with their respective positions within the royal family. As British royals, Edward was, and Harry still is, subject to the same set of rules that govern the line of succession to the throne, but their respective positions within the line of succession are very different. And those differences not only impacted the decisions that each of these men made, but also their overall mental and emotional states of mind. The rules governing the line of succession were established by the British Parliament centuries before either Edward or Harry were even born. And those rules are defined by two laws called the Bill of Rights of 1689 and the Act of Settlement of 1701. Both of these laws codified male preference primogeniture and prohibited anyone who is Roman Catholic or married to a Roman Catholic from being eligible to be on the throne. But some recent changes have been made that loosened some of the rules for anyone born into the royal family after 2011. Within the line of succession, primogeniture creates a vast distinction between those who are firstborn and those who are not. Further, every person's position within the line of succession is ultimately dynamic. It changes whenever something significant happens to someone above their own position in the line, but their position won't be impacted if something happens to someone who is below their own position. Edward VIII was the firstborn son of King George V, and when George V died in early 1936, Edward automatically became king, which also made him the head of the Church of England, which has rules regarding when a divorcee is free to marry again. Wallis Simpson was married to her second husband when she first met Edward at a party in 1931. But in spite of the fact that she was already married and had already been divorced once, Edward courted her and fell in love with her to the chagrin of both the British government and the Church of England. Then when his father died and Edward became king, it was simply not legally possible for him to marry Wallis Simpson, so in the same year that he became king, he abdicated to be free to marry Simpson, who had finally obtained her second divorce. Though he and Wallis Simpson never had children, by abdicating it would have denied any children that they might have had from being eligible to becoming monarch. And because Edward had no legitimate heirs when he abdicated, the next in line of succession was his younger brother, Prince Albert, who took the name King George VI. Edward's abdication and her father becoming king thrusted George VI's eldest daughter, Elizabeth, into being the heir apparent to the throne, and her younger sister, Princess Margaret, into second position in the line of succession, because George VI had no sons. But the line of succession changed several years later after Elizabeth had married Prince Philip and gave birth to their first son, Prince Charles, on November 14, 1948, which immediately made him second in line to the throne after his grandfather and his mother. This in turn moved Princess Margaret's position downward to third position. Then, when Elizabeth gave birth to Princess Anne on August 15, 1950, she became third in line to the throne behind her grandfather, mother, and her older brother Charles, while Princess Margaret saw her position in the line of succession drop again to fourth position. Then, upon the death of King George VI in 1952, Elizabeth was crowned queen, so the positions in the line of succession held by Charles, Princess Anne, and Princess Margaret each moved up by one. A few years later, Queen Elizabeth II gave birth to two more children, Prince Andrew on February 16, 1960, and Prince Edward, who was born on March 10, 1964. Because of male preference primogeniture, their births caused Princess Anne's position in the line of succession to drop by 2 positions, as did Princess Margaret's. So these top 5 positions within the line of succession then remained unchanged for the next 13 years, until Princess Anne gave birth to 2 children, Peter Phillips on November 15, 1977, and Zara Phillips on May 15, 1981. Their births caused Princess Margaret's position in the line of succession to drop by 2 to 7th place. But the biggest change during the early 1980s occurred the following year, with the birth of Prince William to Charles and his then wife, Princess Diana, on June 21, 1982. at which point the newly born William became second in the line of succession after his father, and everyone else's positions fell by one. This situation repeated when Prince Harry was born 2 years later on September 15, 1984, when he became third in line to the throne after his father and his older brother Prince William, which then moved everyone else below Harry down by one position again. Two more changes occurred a few years later in 1988 and 1990, when Prince Andrew had two daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, whose births then caused everyone from Prince Edward downwards to move 2 positions lower. Thus, when the Queen's younger sister, Princess Margaret, died in 2002, which was when Harry was 17 years old, Margaret was, at the time, in 11th position of the line of succession. So over the course of her life, from the time she was a little girl, she watched her position in the line of succession drop 9 times. But what I have started to wonder about is whether, prior to her death, did Princess Margaret ever sit down and talk with Harry about the fact that when his older brother would eventually start having children of his own, that Harry's position within the line of succession would start to shift downwards just like hers had? Or did either of Harry's uncles or his aunt, Princess Anne, do the same? Surely someone would have sat down and explained the facts of the line of succession to Harry so that he would be emotionally prepared when his own position within it would eventually be downwardly impacted. But Harry would not actually be impacted for another 11 years, when he was 28 years old. And because there were other grandchildren and great-grandchildren being born to the Queen during this period of time, I decided not to focus on that to keep the tree simpler for the video. So when Harry was 28 years old, that was when his older brother, Prince William, and William's wife, Kate Middleton, had their first child, Prince George, who was born on July 22nd, 2013. So for the first time in Harry's life, at the age of 28, his position within the line of succession was downwardly impacted as it moved from third to fourth because Prince George had become third in line. Naturally, everyone else below Harry in the line of succession was also moved down by one position. Did Harry experience any resentment or any other adverse feelings when his own position in the line of succession finally dropped to fourth in 2013? 2 years later, Prince William and Kate had their second child, Princess Charlotte, who was born on May 2nd, 2015, which pushed Harry's position down again to fifth, as well as everyone else beneath him by one position. It was only a little over a year later, in July 2016, when Harry met Meghan Markel. And a mere 2 years after that, William and Kate had their third child, Prince Louis, who was born on April 23rd, 2018, pushing Harry's position down to sixth in the line of succession. And this demotion occurred only 1 month before his marriage to Meghan Markle on May 19th, 2018. Thus, after spending 28 years in third position from the throne, Harry's position within the royal family's line of succession dropped 3 places to sixth within a span of only 5 years, making him far less relevant, just like the rest of the members of the royal family, whose positions are even lower than his. During the 2021 interviews that Harry and Meghan had with Oprah Winfrey, Harry said that he had turned to alcohol and drugs at one point in an effort to deal with the feelings that he had experienced from the death of his mother when he was 12. He also said that the trauma of Diana's death had caused him to suffer anxiety and severe panic attacks between the ages of 28 and 32, but this would mean that these issues began 16 years after the death of his mother, which in my opinion doesn't make sense, though I am not a trained psychologist. But what did happen when Harry was 28 years old? As I had just talked about moments ago in this video, Harry was demoted in the line of succession for the first time in his life after the birth of his nephew, Prince George. Then he was demoted again 2 years later after the birth of his niece, Princess Charlotte. He then turned 32 in September 2016, just 2 months after he met Meghan Markle. So though I am not a trained psychologist, in my own opinion, I think that a more recent event would be a more likely cause of anxiety and panic attacks than something that someone had experienced 16 years before and had already been dealing with that entire time. But if having Meghan Markle in his life is what actually helped Harry to stop suffering from his reported anxiety and panic attacks, that could explain why he had become so defensive when William had reportedly questioned him about how quickly Harry's relationship with Meghan had developed prior to their marriage in 2018. It was only 19 months after Harry and Meghan's lavish 2018 royal wedding that had cost around £32 million when the so-called Sandringham Summit occurred on January 13, 2020. This was the summit that Harry claimed in the critically panned Netflix docuseries that William had yelled at Harry, "Oh dear." The Queen had also released an announcement on that same day that Harry and Meghan were quitting the royal family, which then became official on March 31st, 2020. 4 months later, Harry and Meghan purchased their $14 million mansion in Santa Barbara, California in July 2020. The same mansion where that absolutely awful Netflix docuseries that they co-produced was filmed, so that they could showcase just how miserable their privileged lives had become. Oh, how it's so terrible. And it was 2 months after purchasing their mansion in September 2020 when Harry and Meghan had signed the $100 million docuseries deal with Netflix. When Queen Elizabeth II died on September 8, 2022, Charles became king, with everyone else in the royal family moving up one position within the line of succession, including Harry. So Harry's position within the line of succession is back to 5th place. But in my opinion, it's highly unlikely that it will ever go above that at this point, because King Charles will probably live to see great-grandchildren being born to one of William and Kate's children in the next decade or so, which will then push Harry down the line of succession again, just like what happened to Princess Margaret and Charles's siblings. King Edward VIII could only marry Wallis Simpson after abdicating from the throne, but Queen Elizabeth II had granted permission to Harry and Meghan to marry and ensured that they had a lavish royal wedding. No one ever forced Harry and Meghan to quit the royal family. They made that choice of their own accord, and as far as I'm concerned, an ungrateful choice at that. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to see more of our videos in the future and help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.